Well, folks, Tesla is at it again. The North American charging standard wasn't enough. Now they've created the low voltage connecting standard and they're sharing it with the world. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I am traveling and working, so I've been very busy, but I wanted to call out this particular development from Tesla because I think this is important. It not only shows what Tesla is thinking about and how they're making the world more efficient, but also how they're willing to share it with the rest of the world to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy, which is amazing. So you can see here on October 27th that Tesla produced this document, Standardizing Automotive Connectivity. As they say, over the past 20 years, the cost and complexity of electronics across the automotive industry has doubled. Today, a single vehicle typically requires over 200 connections, and the number of electrical connectors and types across new vehicles is only increasing. And then, as per Tesla's mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, we are simplifying the manufacturing process and electrical connectivity requirements for all of our vehicles. This includes the implementation of our low voltage connector standard, or LVCS, which allows us to reduce the large number of connector types required to just 6. So 6. Very big reduction from 200 down to 6. These 6 device connectors are designed to meet the power and signal requirements for over 90% of typical electrical device applications. This standardization unlocks further operational efficiencies, cost reductions, and manufacturing automation. And of course, here you can see the 6 designs, and they're obviously designed to be little snap-on kind of things, so you don't have to have any tools to connect these parts. You've got a male and a female end. I assume that there's a male end on the other side. We're looking at the female end of these, but you can see that there are 2 leads here. There's 4 here. There's 6 over here. 2 with larger power requirements here, 4 here, and then 2 with large power requirement and 4 smaller ones here. So you're getting a range of different types of connectors. These probably are more like data leads because they're smaller, and then these are actually power over these things, and this would have data plus power. So that's my guess. I don't know, but that's just looking at it, what appears to be the case with these connectors. And of course, what's important here is not just that they're standardizing on this, but these are also 48-volt architecture, which is going to make it easier for other companies to adopt the 48-volt architecture. Of course, Tesla with the Cybertruck introduced 48-volt architecture into a mainstream vehicle, and that's really amazing. But if they don't get the rest of the industry going with it, then we're not going to see the full benefits of the 48-volt architecture. And by the way, Sandy Monroe's channel recently did a really good video on the 48-volt architecture with the window motors and how there's not an efficiency gain in terms of the current being used for the window motors, but there is a huge efficiency gain in the cost of the components that allow the wheels to turn, the actuators that turn the wheels. Really fascinating episode. If you haven't seen it, I highly encourage you to go have a look. But anyway, the wheel actuators, the motors that turn the wheels, they depend on 48-volt architecture. It would be much more expensive, and also the cabling would be much larger, and the motors themselves would be bigger. So there's a lot of reasons why they have to go with 48-volt architecture, not so much for the efficiency of things like rolling a window up and down, which is not that big a deal, but for other things, and then also for reducing cabling size and things like that. And you can see these cable connectors are really quite elegant, and they should work again for 90% of connection needs. And of course, speaking of that, they continue. LVCS expands upon the same 48-volt electronic architecture used for Cybertruck, so there's a good chance that in our Cybertruck and in your Cybertruck, if you have one, that these connectors already exist there. Can't guarantee that, but probably they are. As Tesla says, it meets the requirement for increased spacing for 48-volt operation and is available in industry standard light blue. The 48-volt architecture is the optimal long-term choice, requiring 1/4 of the current to deliver the same amount of power. And again, watch the Sandy Monroe episode. It's not as simple as all of that, but it does make a big difference. And then Tesla finishes up by saying, designed to enable reliable autonomous vehicles. Interesting. It utilizes robust single wire sealing and independent secondary locking mechanisms while minimizing the package size. And then of course Tesla says, we invite all device suppliers and vehicle manufacturers to join us in this initiative. Any questions can be directed to lvcs@tesla.com. So I guess if you got a question, send off an email there. So let's take another look at these connectors and think about what this actually enables Tesla to do, particularly with autonomous vehicles, as they said, i.e. the Cybercab. So the big thing about the Cybercab is, of course, that it's going to be autonomous. It has no steering wheel and no pedals or anything like that. But just as important, it's going to be built in an unboxed method, and the likelihood is that the next generation Model Y, Project Juniper, which supposedly is coming out very soon, is going to be built in a semi-unboxed method. If you don't know what unboxed is, it basically means that the current way of putting a car together is you put the whole thing together, then you paint it, the outside of it, then you take it back apart again, and then you put all the internals into the car, and then you put the outside back on again. That's a kind of a simplified version. That is incredibly inefficient. It takes a lot of human capital in terms of people pulling things off and getting inside the car to put in electronics and stuff like that. It's much easier to think of a car as like a Lego set, right? So you might have the front motor area or something like that, the wheels, then you have the back area, then you have the underneath part with the battery and everything, and then you have the frame, and then you have the paneling, the fascia, whatever goes on the outside. So all of those things can be done separately if you want to paint them. If it's not a Cybertruck, if it's like a more traditional vehicle like a Model 3 or Model Y, you would paint all of the doors and everything on their own. You don't have to put them in the vehicle first. You can paint them separately, and therefore the color will match, which is the reason why you had to build the car all together in the first place. But in the meantime, while you're doing the painting and stuff like that, you can build all of the other pieces, and when you get done, you just stick them together. But one of the major problems with building things in an unboxed method is actually the wiring. It's very difficult to, string miles worth of cable or something like that around a vehicle when it's not put together. And then, it's like, how do you string that stuff? You have to put the vehicle together and then string all the wiring together before you can finish building the vehicle. But what Tesla has done, they've talked about this before, and clearly this is even more of an advance towards that direction, is they've just created these snap-on connectors. So basically you can build, let's say you want to build the front part of the vehicle, the part where the motor is in the front and everything like that, and you've got your giga casting and all of those kinds of pieces. You build that, and then there would be maybe 3 or 4 of these snap-on connectors that would come out of the front of the vehicle, that would go into the main part, that would carry data, that would carry power, things like that, low voltage power. Again, this is definitely not from the high voltage battery that drives the motor. That's a whole separate thing. This is things like power windows, potentially the wireless steering and wireless braking, the entertainment system, and things like tire pressure sensor gauges and stuff like that, and anti-lock braking systems and all of that. And of course, what you want is you want all of the different elements of the car that you're building separately to have as few connectors and have the simplest connectors possible. So you just standardize on these connectors here, and let's say a half dozen, 3, whatever, it doesn't really matter. You just have these things that are sticking out from each part of the car, and when you marry them together at the final part of the assembly, you just go snap, 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 and you put them together. The whole thing's connected up. Tesla, of course, famously, the car tests itself component by component. So let's say you built the front portion of the car with the motor in it. It's going to self-test itself when you put it all together. It's going to be like, yep, I'm good, everything's good. Then when you plug it in, it goes click, 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 all these parts go together, and that portion of the car, the front of the car, can test itself versus the main driving computer and everything that's in part of the cabin. So all of this stuff can be done automatically and very, very efficiently. The need for wiring is reduced as long as you have a known stable interface, which is what these are. You can make changes to the front as long as these things are still in the same place and they're the same connectors. You just plug them in, everything goes, so that you can build the car efficiently. And if you want to make changes to the front end of the vehicle, you can just do that without having to make changes to anything else, because you don't have to deal with spaghetti wiring all over the vehicle. So not only are these critical for the 48-volt architecture and for managing that and for managing the higher voltage and things like that, they talk about the separation so that clearly there's more insulation for these things as they're connected together. But even more importantly, they are known stable interfaces that can be plugged in as an unboxed vehicle, is final assembled, and it can be done very, very quickly. You snap the parts of the vehicle together, you snap these electrical connections together so you get data and power, and you're done. And so that makes making a car much more efficient. And then of course, Tesla and other OEMs are not the only beneficiaries of this. Also, the upstream suppliers are beneficiaries of this. So think about the fact that if you're manufacturing cabling and connectors and things like that for a car company, rather than making these one-offs, so you're only making a few thousand of these a year. If you make these kinds of connectors and you put cabling and all that kind of stuff to sell to OEMs like Tesla and other companies, if they adopt this, you could instead be making hundreds of thousands or millions of these connectors a year, which means through manufacturing efficiency and rights law that it costs a lot less to make these things, which means you can charge less to these companies, which means that these companies can turn around and sell the vehicle for less and or make more profit on it. So everybody wins. This is the kind of thing where if a company doesn't do this in a few years, they're going to be left behind and their cars are going to look outdated. They're going to be more expensive because the parts are going to be more expensive, and the upstream suppliers for those companies are also going to have problems if they don't adopt this standard as well, because they're going to be selling into a smaller and smaller niche market, and they're going to have more expensive components than these other companies do. So my prediction is that we'll see a company, maybe it'll be Rivian, maybe it'll be a big company like Ford or something, they will adopt this standard, and as soon as they do, everybody else will. It'll be just like the North American charging standard, the NACS standard for plugging in the high voltage battery into a charging system. You'll have something just like that where once Ford or somebody else says yes to this, then you're just going to see a whole bunch of companies adopt it really, really quickly. And the companies that adopt this the most quickly will probably be the ones who, ultimately have the best chance of survival. So you can pretty much just watch the dominoes. It's like, who's going to adopt this first and who's going to adopt this last? That's the most likely to survive down to the least likely to survive. So like I said in the intro, this is a really big deal. It doesn't look like it that much at the beginning. It's like, oh great, it's just a connector or something. But when you start thinking about what thought Tesla has put into this, the fact that you're going from potentially 200 types of connectors down to 6, and the fact that they are sharing this with everybody else, and the fact that upstream suppliers will start to standardize on this as well, you're looking at a real revolution here, and anybody who doesn't get on board with it is going to be left behind. And Tesla, as always, is leading the charge. So congratulations to Tesla and the engineers who came up with this, and let's hope that other car companies adopt this as quickly as possible, because it will be to the benefit of everyone. All right, so that's what I've got for you. I've got to get back to work, but definitely let me know what you think about all of this in the comments. And while you're down there, if you don't mind liking and subscribing, it really helps out the channel. I would love to make it to 100,000 subscribers before my birthday at the end of January, so please help me out on that quest, and I will see you in the next video.